Disorders and mental illness in the equestrian athletes, so that's you guys, and the equine workplace. And this is me. My name is Becky van den Berghade. I'm an accredited coach of the BHS. I'm based in Littlehampton, which is on the West Sussex coast, and I host training clinics all over Sussex and Surrey. I teach private clients, I host lectures, take lectures on training so equestrian athletes, and also the training of the horse. And I also compete dressage with my own and school other people's horses. I'm also recovering from an eating disorder, which is why I'm here. Yesterday saw the first day of International Eating Disorders Awareness Week. And so I decided, because April hopefully will be my complete discharge date this year. So I decided to raise awareness during International Eating Disorders Awareness Week that I wanted to travel around speaking to equestrian colleges and students, talking about particularly eating disorders within the industry, and to raise awareness. And I also want to raise some funds, if possible, for BEAT, which is the UK's leading eating disorder charity. They are very, very proactive in doing research, campaigning government for getting more help for outpatient services, and also offer helplines and support for carers and sufferers. So a lot of work. So raising awareness, guess we better find out where you are in the first place. So what do you perceive or understand to be an eating disorder? Can you name an eating disorder? There's no wrong answer, don't worry, it's not a trick question.
Something from the back of the
Anorexia, yeah. Anything else?
Bulimia.
Yeah.
Binge eating.
Binge eating, yeah. That's the most I've had so far. Out of 4 colleges, I usually get the first 2 and then no one gets any further. That's not your fault, that's just what everybody publicises. It's the only, the 2. It's not even the 2 main ones, it's not even the most common. But yeah, we hear a lot about anorexia and bulimia. What's your perception or understanding of what a mental illness is? Just gave you one. An eating disorder is nothing to do with food, basically. It is a mental illness. Yes, food is the thing that people with eating disorders focus on, whether that's binge eating, purging, restricting, but it is a mental illness. So is anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and those are the really, really common ones. Who suffers? Anybody. Anybody of any age, at any time. Why does it happen? I'll come back to that. And how we can help. Again, I'll come back to that, and hopefully it will make it a little bit clearer. So, statistics. Everyone says, yeah, eating disorders, yeah, mental illness. It's been in the press lots. But 1 in 4 adults, so that's a quarter. So a quarter of the people in this room at some point in this year will suffer with some sort of mental illness. Only, again, half of that will receive treatment. That's partly because people don't come forwards, partly because it's not recognised, it's dismissed as suck it up, you'll be alright, grow a pair, all of the usuals. Particularly around the horse industry. How many times have you hit the deck and are you hurt? No. What are you doing still there? Get up. So we're expected to be a lot tougher than most. But also, eating disorders, 1.25 million, 1.25 million people in the UK have an eating disorder. 11% of those male, So a lot of the times, in the press we hear about anorexia and bulimia, and we talk about, and there's all these pictures of these really super skinny girls. It's not always the case. A lot of them are male. Anorexia does have the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder. This is being slightly overtaken by an eating disorder that isn't actually officially recognised yet by the medical profession. That is actually basically it's only evident in people with type 1 diabetes, where they basically abuse their insulin to lose weight, so they stop taking their insulin, with obviously huge health ramifications. Anorexia sufferers, 20% will die prematurely from their illness. That's partly due to medical complications. That's also partly due to suicide. Eating disorders as a mental illness carry a high suicide risk. Bulimia often as well carries severe medical complications. They all, regardless of the illness, all affect the quality of the life of the sufferer. Stands to reason. But it also affects the quality of life of the carers. My sister, bless her, has come to hold my hand today. This is my 4th college that I've lectured this to, so I'm a lot less nervous than I was on the first time. But I know for sure I put her through hell. And doing this is my way of giving it back to a charity that helped me and helped them. Only about half of anorexia and bulimia patients recover, complete recovery. A third improve, and about 20% remain chronically ill. Again, these figures, because like I said at the beginning, anorexia and bulimia are the very, the ones that get a lot of press. So these are what the statistics, the bent seems to go towards that. On average, this is the latest research from BEAT, people wait 3.5 years to seek treatment for their eating disorder. I hid my eating disorder for 2.5, really successfully and very, very easily. And on average, people visit their GP 3 times before they get a referral. For me, I was lucky, it was twice. First time, it went under the radar. Adults wait twice as long as children, and men and boys wait longer. Again, we're unsure as to whether these statistics are due to people not coming forward, people lying to the doctors, not that I did that at all, or whether it is just that the medical profession are letting these guys down. Mind is the charity that, a UK-based charity that supports mental illness, same way that BEAT does for eating disorders. And these are their latest statistics for mental illnesses. This one I find terrifying. That 20% of people have had suicidal thoughts at some point in their life. That's a lot of people. So why is that? Why does nobody talk about it? And why does everybody say, yeah, but that's not me. That doesn't happen to me. It's not going to happen to me. Nearly 7 people in 100 have attempted suicide. And just over 7 people in 100 self-harm. So the point of all those statistics is that mental health issues are more common, generally, than we may think. And eating disorders in particular. There was an article that came out in The Guardian last week, I believe, and it was just prior to, obviously, the advent of International Eating Disorders Week, and they were talking about the fact that BEAT's helpline on the year 2016 to 2017 received 7,000 calls. This last year, up until basically now, so they're still counting, they received 17,000. So it's gone up by 10,000. admissions to inpatients for people with eating disorders, so that's people that are at severe risk of life, have doubled in 6 years. Does that mean we're getting more people with eating disorders, or more people are slipping through the net to the point where they are at risk of their own life and we have to admit them to hospital? But that is not a statistic that can carry on any further. Why the equine workplace? If obviously you guys are at an equestrian college, and I am presuming, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have experience of looking after horses, being with horses. Some of you might have worked with them prior to coming to college. It's a really demanding lifestyle. It's not a job, it's a way of life, and it's a tough one. There's a lot of isolation involved. You know, everyone sort of aspires to be these high-end grooms, that travelling grooms, sole charge grooms. It can be really lonely, and that puts a lot of pressure on. Financial pressure. Who's in it for the money? I'm glad no one raised their hands, because you might want to change course. But basically, it's hard to make ends meet. You can make a living, but again, it's financial pressure, more pressure to perform. It's not just the riders, it's the grooms. If they make a mistake in the care of the horse, or the farrier, or the physio, or whoever, so there is a lot of pressure. There is an element of image awareness. There is a study going on in the racing industry. Into British Equestrian Federation is doing a study into mental illness within the racing industry. I think they should broaden it, obviously. But they've been well known for, as long as racing's gone on, for keeping the weight down, for racing weight. Showing is another one for image awareness, looking the part. Now, being a competing athlete, and you are an athlete, if you ride, you're an athlete. Severe psychological and physical stress. Put that on yourself, just wanting to get better. But also from coaches, from parents, from peers, teammates. Sports can emphasise the appearance and size, muscularity. Joggers, breeches, they don't really hide an awful lot. So we're obviously very aware of how we look all the time. Whether we say it bothers us or not, we still know. The focus can be too much on the individual rather than the team. Even if you compete on your own, if you think about it, you're still part of a team, aren't you? You're just sat on the other half. So let's, pull the emphasis away from just that one. We often, in the equine world, it's also very common in things like gymnastics, that you train for the sport since very early in your childhood. That can lead to all sorts of problems in delayed puberty, because you're training so hard. So then when you do change, it can be a bit of a shock to the system. There's obviously a lot of pressure, and that's your world. So it can cause issues training like that from a child. And the pushy parent syndrome, and pushy coaches. I've heard coaches go on at their clients at events, and I'm thinking, and they're listening. General contributing factors. Low self-esteem. That all of these things. Obviously, this lecture it's about mental illness, and to raise awareness, but specifically eating disorders. Low self-esteem is a risk factor for any mental illness, particularly eating disorders. Family dysfunction, anything that is going to cause upset. That can be a parental split, that can be arguments with siblings. Love you, by the way. But obviously that's our stable, what we want to go back to if we're having trouble at work or college, so it can be very disruptive. Coming from a family that has an eating disorder or a history of chronic dieting, it changes how the individual looks at food. And obviously, particularly if they're exposed to it during childhood, it can sort of what's the word? Not embed itself, but you know, it's in your formative years, so you sort of learn that as that's the right way to be, or there's nothing abnormal about being like that. A risk factor is the group that has had a history of physical or sexual abuse at some point in their life. Obviously the peer, family and cultural pressures to be thin. I use social media a lot for my business. I couldn't care less about it for my personal life. No one wants to know about me personally, but I want them to know everything about my working life. So, but I'm amazed by the amount of heavily photoshopped stuff that still goes on, just like people sharing their own images. I'm like, mate, I saw you at work and you don't look like that. So it can be very misleading, and I think that's becoming more and more of a problem. Traumatic life experiences. I don't know how much any of you are sort of looking at or following or know about people that have been in like the armed forces and things like that have suffered, you know, and seen things that nobody should have to see and gone through that kind of thing. And we talk about them having post-traumatic stress disorder. That can happen following loads of things. It can happen following a car accident, following the death of a member of family. And a way of coping is an eating disorder. My story. This is my horse Merlin, and this is me. That picture was taken last summer. I'm looking to Victoria for help. Yes, it was last summer. It's the only picture I'm going to put up of me, because it's not about the shock factor of, oh, you know, look how much weight she lost. Also, an eating disorder doesn't necessarily mean that you lose weight. You can gain it, you can fluctuate. But also, for somebody that has an eating disorder or somebody that is potentially struggling a little bit, having an image of somebody can actually be a bit of a trigger. I'm also not going to discuss what weight I got to, for the same reason. If I saw a weight written down of somebody that maybe was lighter than me, I saw that as a goal. I wanted to be less than them. I wanted to be thinner than them, lighter than them, iller than them. It was a competition. Sad, but that's how I felt at the time. So that's all we're going to talk about with that. So yeah, what happened to me? Basically, all I ever wanted to do was work with horses. And I ended up having a non-horsey start in life, went off to uni, did a non-horsey thing, blah, blah, blah. And then ended up going to Trent Park to get my AI. And following that, I left and went off to groom for a few people. I started doing some freelance, and then I opened my own yard, which ran very nicely for 6 years. I built up a derelict farm into a very successful livery yard with a waiting list, and we had clinics. I had horses to back and break. And then in the January of 2014, I had a month's notice to quit. The landlord decided it was worth more to develop on. I had 14 clients, had 2 of my own, and I had a month. I lost everything. I had nowhere to live, I had no job, I had no business, I had nowhere to keep my horses, and I was on the edge of bankruptcy. Then a year, 11 months followed that I lost 4 members of family in a year. And with each thing that happened, I kept saying, I can cope, I'm fine. I was always the person that people came to. I was always the happy one. And I kept saying, no, I'm fine. And then he went lame. And at the time, I was working for a construction firm in a very stressful job, running building sites, and denying to myself that I had any kind of issue with food. But I obviously had done for 2.5 years. Because I was just ill after eating, wasn't I? Because I just ate too much, didn't I? It wasn't me that did that. And I kept lying to myself. And then the final straw, just one more thing snapped. and I became very, very ill. I went to the doctors the first time, having been dragged there kicking and screaming by my husband, and they said I was fine. I had depression. So they just told me to take some time off work, maybe consider some antidepressants, and left it at that. My husband went away to work and he came back 3 weeks later to find me, I was fine, wasn't I? So I could carry on with that behaviour. I could even make it worse because I was normal. So he went away and I just stopped eating. And so then I got taken back again, and the doctor this time that I saw recognised the problem and sent me urgent referral to a specialist unit. Luckily I never became an inpatient. It was close, but I didn't become an inpatient. Most people have like a knife, what we describe as a knife edge moment, that you kind of choose to get better, or you choose to just give up. And for me, we just talked about that. It was a long time coming. This is what it's like from the inside. I was absolutely obsessed by food. My whole day, all I thought about was food. Yet I had to have it in a certain routine, at a certain time, in a certain way. I'd have panic attacks if I couldn't have that food at that time. I'd make myself late to teach clients because I wanted to stop. I wouldn't eat in public. I was freezing all of the time. Terrible stomach cramps. Because of the type of eating disorder that I suffered with, or the symptoms, I had a permanent sore throat, and I've damaged the enamel to the back of my teeth. That's not going to get any better. Heart irregularities, still have heart irregularities. Insomnia, night sweats. After a certain point, your periods stop. You can't concentrate. Your brain, have a guess, how many calories do you reckon your brain needs a day? Some of you might even know this, or if the sports lot were here, they might know. Guess?
1,000?
No, not quite. Your brain might, mine doesn't. 500.
Sorry, I'm not sorry. It's like our science. It's a student.
500 calories a day. On a bad day, I might only eat 8. So I literally could not think straight. You can't think straight. People try and talk sense to you and you just can't process it. And the obvious fainting and dizzy spells. Why wouldn't I want to get better? But to me, this was my friend. This was my way of coping. It was something that I could control. Everything else had gone out of my control, but no one could make me eat. It is so hard to get better. It is so hard. So what happened for me, my knife edge moment, were a couple. One, I was absolutely adamant that I was well enough to ride. My horse is 17.3 warm blood, sharp as a tack, and has a beautiful bronc. And I, for some reason, thought that this would be fine, that I could stay there. I wasn't well enough to go to work. I had to quit my job, but I could ride, couldn't I? So I got on a rather fresh Merlin in spring after 3 days off, and suffered a really nasty fall and was taken to hospital with suspected broken pelvis and thigh. Incredibly, I hadn't broken anything, but the doctors advised me not to get back on the horse because my bones were too weak, my organs were too weak, and I just wasn't strong enough to stay there. That hit home really hard. And then a subsequent collapse, loss of consciousness in a shower that I went through a glass shower screen. And it could have been much, much worse had somebody have not found me. And so that was my knife edge moment. I decided I had to try harder to get better for my family. I didn't care about me, but I cared about them. if somebody had stopped me earlier, it would have been a lot easier. So basically, the earlier we can catch people and the earlier we can intervene, the better the outcome is. So what can we do to help? As a coach, I am naturally quite a positive coach. I do have, I wouldn't say a unique style, but you know, it's orientated around the person. It's not about the goal. I teach everything from people that are riding and or aspiring to nationals to people that just want to hack safely, that are terrified to go out on their own. But it's very individual. Social influence and support from your teammates to a healthy, well, body image, self-image, not just body image. Encouraging coaches to emphasise factors that contribute to personal success, such as motivation and enthusiasm. As an employer, I have employed people that have all the pieces of paper and they can turn a horse out beautifully, but they're not necessarily easy to work with, and they might not actually want to try any harder than what they've already got. Yeah, I've employed people that have no qualifications, but they are keen and they are really motivated, and actually they're the ones that I've had a few working pupils that have gone on, there's the ones that their equine career has taken off because they've made it happen. What can we do within a peer group or workplace? Have a zero tolerance on bullying. It's not, well, I don't agree that, I don't think that anyone would disagree that it is acceptable in any form. And focusing on people's personality strengths and their skills rather than their body image. Everyone's got different skills, and together, working as a team, you can be a formidable force. Encourage individuals to talk about something, whether it's relationships, family issues, money trouble. And if they can't talk to you, maybe point them in the direction of someone that they can talk to and someone that can help. There is so much help out there for everything. You know, name a problem. There is a body, a fund, a help group that will help you through it. You just got to know where to look. Unfortunately, it all has to be self-driven. So if you can spot that your friend is struggling or your colleague is struggling, help them, push them in the right direction because they're unlikely to push themselves. Look out for some potential symptoms. Social isolation, become a bit withdrawn. Somebody with an eating disorder will tend to become a bit withdrawn. Avoid eating around others. Have difficulty concentrating. We talked about why. Be very tired. You've got no fuel. You're exhausted. I would find the thought of coming up those stairs like just really and irritable. I took hangry to a whole new level, and you have very low self-confidence and self-esteem, and you're very anxious. That is partly, again, it's a physiological change that happens within your body, because your hormones go out of sync, your electrolytes go out of sync, so your body's constantly on high alert, because it thinks it's starving, it's at risk of life, so it's panicking all of the time. Obsessive or rigid behaviour, well, yeah, I'm a perfectionist naturally, so if I start to be more of a perfectionist, that's nothing unusual, but becoming uncharacteristically perfectionist and being very self-critical, self-harm. Often people with eating disorders will turn to self-harm as well. Changes to weight, I've discussed the fact that it's not just about losing, it can be gaining or fluctuating weight. So now what do? Encourage them to make an appointment with their GP. Don't be put off by what I said that they can, get knocked back a couple of times or passed on to the next person. Make an appointment with the GP. Beat has a very good advice on their website about how to approach a GP. My husband, the second time, phoned the practice and requested a GP that specialised in mental illness, or preferably had a sort of bent towards eating disorders, as he suspected that that's what I had a problem with. And then, again, Beat is very useful. Their website, their helplines for carers, teachers, employers, just to give you some advice of, oh, I think somebody's struggling, what can I do? What, you know, am I seeing things, or should I say something? So, yeah, that's Beat. EDNOS stands for Eating Disorder Not Otherwise Specified. So even now, although they recognise that there are subtypes of, for example, anorexia, bulimia, there's eating disorder not otherwise specified, means that you don't quite reach the characteristics or criteria for an official medical diagnosis of anorexia, bulimia, or anorexia or bulimia. And most of this, sadly, is simply down to the BMI. So if you don't basically get low enough, you don't qualify. Which to some people, again, certainly for myself, I wasn't ill enough to need help, so I didn't go until I was taken. People still suffer and still become very, very ill from EDNOS. That's their website. They are only open, their helplines only open between 3 and 10. Mainly because that's the time that most people seem to call, but also they can't do it 24 hours because they haven't got enough money. So unlike, say, the Samaritans, or Mind is, I believe, 24 hours, certainly were, Beat can't afford to. A lot of it's volunteer based, so they need all the help they can get. And that's me. Like I said, I do a lot on social media, so please like and share my page. It's not just about this, there's obviously a lot about this lecture series on there at the moment because it's International Eating Disorders Week, Awareness Week, but other than that, it's about my training clinics and bits and bobs, and I'll be posting like training videos on that kind of thing. So, when I can slowly work out the technology, which I'm not really good at. She's the one for that. So, does anyone have any questions? Silence. If anyone does have any questions, but you don't feel comfortable talking in front of the group, you're more than welcome to come and see me afterwards, or my cards are on the table if you want to just email me afterwards, or private message me or whatever, that's absolutely fine. Because I know some people might not want to say. That's cool. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming up, Becky. I hope you all learned something. If you do have any questions, please do come and ask either Becky or any of us as well. Yeah, I know I learned something from it, so I think you will be. Thank you.
And hopefully I didn't manage to talk too quickly.
Are we free to go?
Yeah, you're free to go. Well, from my perspective, yeah, you're free to go. Oh,
If you want to get anything from our...
yeah, sorry, I did, yeah, there is some literature here. There's my card.